welcome back to Jane's Stories of Life. Today was kind of a maintenance day. I needed to have my eyes checked. I needed to have new reading glasses made. And I also needed some maintenance on my vehicle. So I did everything in one day. First, I went to have my eyes checked, had a prescription filled for another pair of reading glasses, and then off to have the oil change. When I have my oil change, I always go to the dealer for that. And I know people say, why don't you just go somewhere? Well, years ago, I had a very bad experience with Jiffy Lube. And after that, I said, from now on, I'm going to the dealer. They can do, whatever needs to be done, which is what I do. And today I was thinking about my history of vehicles. I grew up in Cleveland, as you know. My mom, I never learned how to ride a bicycle because I had a very nervous mom. And she was also so nervous that she never learned how to drive. So I grew up with public transportation, or if we had to, we took taxis and cabs and friends and things like that. I did take driver's ed in high school, but because I had no car, I had no means of getting a driver's license. I didn't get a license until I was 22 years old. The backstory of that is, some of you may know, I had a very brief, 4-month, marriage, at which point the man that I was married to decided he'd rather go back home and be married, which he did, which left me wheelless, you might say. I purchased a car with the help of my friend Curly and her husband Rookie. However, when I purchased the car, I didn't have a license. So Rookie had to drive the car to my apartment for me. I then took a crash course in driver's ed. The driving instructor came to my house and went out for driver's lessons. I had my license in a week or two, and I had the car sitting there just waiting for me to drive. Well, it was in 1965, a Volkswagen Beetle or Bug, whatever they called them. They were very popular then, and that was all I could afford. Unfortunately, driving the stick shift was something that I never quite mastered. So within the first 4 or 5 months of owning that car, I burned out 2 clutches, at which point I traded it in for a car with automatic transmission, which was an ugly Rambler. They don't even make those anymore. The company was Nash, and the Rambler was the brand under Nash. Boxy, ugly, yellow. Oh well, it served me well. I had that car for at least 10 years. We had a birthday celebration when that car was 10 years old. It took me to and from my years in Detroit, back to Cleveland when I moved back there. And then when I got married and Morgan and I moved to Schenectady, New York, it took us there. It took us through the birth of 2 children and some of their early years. So, hey, it served me well. I had another car in between, and then mainly our family car was a good old station wagon. I mean, that station wagon, we loved it. We took more road trips and everything else in the station wagon, which we had through the time the children both started college. At some point after college and marriage and maybe 1 or 2 children, Cindy and her family bought a minivan. Well, I fell in love with minivans. So I think probably from 1992 until 2000, I owned a series of 4 or 5 minivans. That's my favorite kind of car. I did have a car or 2 in between, but I loved minivans. Once I had a minivan, I didn't do anything but that from then on. When Morgan died, my minivan was 6 years 6 years older than the SUV that he had. My minivan had twice as many miles, and it needed some work. It probably took me about 4 months, maybe a little bit longer, to finally decide, look, Jane, it makes no sense to own 2 cars, pay 2 registrations, pay insurance on both, and of the 2, keeping his SUV made the most sense. So I got online and contacted Carvana or whoever that is that comes to your house and gives you a check and drives off with your vehicle. And that was when I parted with the minivan. I tell you this, I do not buy lottery tickets. I don't gamble at the casino. I don't have any really rich relatives that I know of. But if I should come into a even mini sizable amount of money, the first thing I'm going to do is go buy myself a new minivan. I love being hot. I love just sliding across the seat. I love the doors and how the back door slides open. I'm just a minivan lover. So the SUV today had an oil change and the tires rotated. And I can't tell you how often I say, I miss my van. I miss my van. These days, if I'm going to the airport or something like that, I use an Uber instead of parking at the airport. And I always get the extra, whatever it is, just for the ease of, the comfort. Several times, people come in their XL, whatever they call that size Uber, in minivans. And unfortunately, the driver usually has to hear me say, oh, wow, I love minivans. I used to have a minivan. I wish I still had. So, if you see me still driving an SUV, you'll know that I didn't come into money. I didn't have anything exciting happen. But those are my fond memories of my vehicles, from the Volkswagen Buggy, or Bug, whatever they call that thing, to my last minivan. That's my semi-history with vehicles. Cherish your memories. What was your first vehicle, by the way? And what do you love? Cherish your memories and pass them on. Hi, I have to do a quick correction on that video about the vehicles. I said I drove minivans until the year 2000. I drove minivans until the year 2020. So it's been the last, wait, no, not 20, yes, yeah, 2020, okay. That's when I traded in. Morgan died in February 2020, so probably July or August of 2020 is when I finally gave up my beloved Toyota minivan. Okay, had to make that correction. Have a good day. Cherish your memories. Pass them on, and I hope sometimes you can correct when I listen to what I said, I said, oops, no, that's the wrong time. I got to correct that. Okay. Bye.